Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is the first episode in a new series that I'm doing about how to improve your coloured pencil drawings. So this is a series that I'm going to be doing an episode for every Tuesday, which I announced in my new upload schedule video that I did yesterday. So if you want to know what my new upload schedule is, feel free to check that out. Anyway, so today's episode is the first episode and I'm going to be going through the pure basics. So how to choose the right materials for you. So whether that's coloured pencils or paper or any of the other things like sharpeners, I'm going to be giving you my recommendations of what I have found has been best for me for different types of my drawing needs. So for example, portraits or landscapes, I'll be giving you my tips on what coloured pencils I preferred for each of those different things. However, this is just my personal opinions of what I have found when I've used all these different types of materials. So if you're still unsure, before going and buying them, have a look at some other videos on YouTube to see if this consolidates your thoughts. Anyway, so whilst I'm giving you my tips, in the background I've got a little video playing where I'm comparing the Prismacolor pencil brand and the polychromos, because these are the two brands that I get asked about so much more than all the other brands. So I'm just doing a little comparison here and I'm testing firstly how they blend together. So the first row is how they blend using just burnishing, which is where you just apply a lot of pressure to the pencil to get the pencils to blend together basically. So I'm doing that with firstly one colour and then with two colours. And then in the second row I'm using the Zest-It pencil blend, and I'm using this with a paintbrush just to blend once again one colour and then two colours. And then I am testing fine detail, so which of the pencils gets a finer point to get more detail work. And then I'm just going through the opaqueness, so how you can layer a light colour on top of the darker colours. And then finally I'm just going through some pros and cons and the expense of each of these different types of coloured pencils. Okay, so the first types of drawings that I'm going to give my opinions for are portrait drawings. So I've used three different kinds of coloured pencil brands before when I've done my portrait drawings, and they are the Prismacolor brands, the Faber-Castell polychromos and the Caran d'Ache luminance. And I have used all of these and enjoyed using all of these for portraits, but I do think that certain ones are better than others. So if I was a beginner and I was choosing my colour pencils again, I would go for the Prismacolors for portraits, purely because they are wax based, so they're really creamy, which means that they are much easier to blend than the Faber-Castell polychromos. I prefer to use the Caran d'Ache luminance, but I wouldn't recommend them for beginners purely because they are so expensive. So if you get the Prismacolors first, then you can really get into grips with practicing them, because the Caran d'Ache luminance have the same sort of properties, so they're wax based as well, so are really creamy to blend with as well. But they are so expensive that for trial and error it's better to use the Prismacolors until you've got a hang of using them, and then buy some Caran d'Ache luminance. However, if you do have the money and you want to splash out on a bit more, then I would opt for getting a set of Caran d'Ache luminance, because they are much higher quality and they have much better light fastness ratings. So light fastness ratings are just how your colours are going to last over time. And so Prismacolor tend to have quite low light fastness ratings for most of its coloured pencils, which means that they are prone to fading quite a lot over time. But for beginners, I wouldn't worry too much about this, because you just want to get a feel for the medium and learn how to use it, and then you can invest in some better quality pencils. So the set that I would recommend starting off with is called the Portrait Set by Prismacolor, and this is a 24 pencil set, I believe, and this has all of the portrait colours that you might need. And this is a really good set to start off with because it holds all of those portrait colours and it's quite cheap. And then if you want to get a basic set of 12 or 36 to have a larger range of colours, then you can do that, but with those smaller sets you don't get all the portrait colours that you might need. The reason that I wouldn't really recommend Faber-Castell polychromos for portraits if you're a beginner is because they are oil based, which means they have a harder lead, and so they are harder to blend than the wax based pencils. So I have used Faber-Castell polychromos for portraits and I didn't really like them as much. I'm going to try and use them again because I've ordered a new blender which I think will work really well with them, but I've also found that they don't have a great range of skin tone values, but that might be just because I haven't particularly had a lot of practice with them, because I've been using the Caran d'Ache quite a lot. So I'm going to practice again doing portraits with Faber-Castell polychromos, but again for beginners I think that Prismacolors are really easy to use and get the hang of. However, there is one thing that you have to be a bit careful with when using Prismacolors, and that is something called wax bloom. So what wax bloom is that once you've done your drawing, a few hours after or a day or so later, you will get this waxy film lay on the top of your drawing, and it will really fade it and make it look really washed out, and it will just be where the wax has raised up on top of the pencil and just form this waxy layer. But that is really easy to clean off. What you have to do is you get a tissue, and I'm going to show you some examples of where wax bloom has formed on some of my drawings. So always check, if you're using Prismacolors, check the drawing a few hours later or a few days later if there's not one after a few hours, and just see if a wax bloom has formed. So here you can see this was a drawing that I did from Storks, and on her jacket you can see it's a bit lighter, and I'm going to rub it over with a tissue, and you can see how it just goes so much darker, and that's because I wiped off that wax bloom. And it's the same with her hair, so I'm going to show you her hair, and that's going to also be quite washed out. But when I go over it with that tissue, it just lifts that wax right off, and you can see those rich colours again which they were before. So always make sure that you've checked to see if there was a wax bloom. Okay, so the next type of drawing that I want to talk about is wildlife and landscapes, because I'm going to recommend the same pencils for both of them. So for wildlife, if you're drawing any types of animals, I really recommend using the Faber-Castell polychromos. That's because these pencils hold their point really well, and you can get really fine detail, which is really good if you're drawing animals and there's lots of different strands of fur or whiskers or little details that you want to get on them. So with drawings where it's landscapes or wildlife and you don't need to blend things so smoothly, you really want those sharp edges, then I really recommend the Faber-Castell polychromos. They're really good at layering, so when you're using a solvent, they're best with solvents. They don't do particularly well when you burnish them. As you can see, they blend much better when you use a solvent, and if you use a solvent you can just add lots and lots of layers if you're using the right paper. So I'm going to go through some papers that I would recommend in a minute. So yeah, I definitely recommend using the Faber-Castell polychromos with landscapes and wildlife. So you can start off by getting a smaller set, maybe the 36-24 set, but then I'd also go and buy some open stock pencils where you can buy them individually and get some more of those natural earthy tones as well to add to your collection. So some of the browns and maybe the greens if you're doing landscapes, some of those colours that you're going to have to use a lot in those landscapes or wildlife drawings. Okay, so the next type of drawings is, what about if you want to do portraits and include elements of wildlife and landscapes within that? Well, I would recommend going with the Prismacolor portrait set, which is going for about £24 online and on Amazon, so that's really cheap, and then maybe get a small set of Faber-Castell polychromos, or just order a few of them open stock, some of your greener tones or your browner tones, to help you so you can do landscapes and that as well with your portraits. Or if you just want to go for one set and one brand, I would recommend going for the Faber-Castell polychromos, because they do have a nice range of portrait colours, and I have seen people get really nice portraits using the Faber-Castell polychromos. So I would go for them over the Prismacolors because you can do a lot of detailed work and do portraits with them. And finally, the last type of drawing that I want to talk about is cartoon and animated drawings. So if you want to do cartoon work, I recommend the Prismacolors because they are really creamy and blend well, and the lay down of the colour is really nice and easy. If you want to do those blocked colours, you can get a really smooth application. So that is what I recommend for cartoon works, because Faber-Castell will just be too hard to blend and get that smooth transition that you need when you're doing cartoons. So for the type of paper that you might want to use, I've used a few different types, and these are the ones that I like. So Bristol Vellum paper, which is the 400 series by Strathmore, is one of my favourites, and I think this works well whether you're doing cartoons, portraits or even landscapes, and I've used it on such a wide variety of my drawings that I think it's a really good all-round type of paper. So no matter what type of drawing you're doing, I think that's a really good option. For cartoon and animated works, I think the Tone Tan paper by Strathmore is also really good because it just helps the cartoons to really pop. And then lastly, I use a lot of thicker papers if I'm using watercolour, but one that's really good if you just want to do colour pencil and you want to do like a landscape or portraits with landscapes is the Fabriano Artistico hot pressed watercolour paper. That is really good and has a nice tooth to hold the colour pencil well. I've also heard that the Stonehenge paper is really good for coloured pencils as well, but I've not personally tried that out. As for sharpeners, I really recommend an electric sharpener because you're going to have to sharpen so many pencils that it's much easier just to have an electric sharpener rather than manually do them. Anyway guys, that's it for this week's episode. Next week I'm going to be showing you how you can use the colour wheel to get the most out of a small range of coloured pencils. So make sure you subscribe to my channel if you're new so you don't miss out on that. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you soon. Bye!